unbelievably consequential people in states are elected by the barest of margins, which means for anyone who wants to make a difference, a few minutes or a few dollars, a few conversations could literally be the difference maker.
Hello, and welcome to the PoliticsGirl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. Well, we're deep into summer now, and people often take this time to check out of politics because the next election seems like a million years away and a totally different era. But we just had the ridiculous America 250 event, and if you're like me, the whole event just reminded you how much we want to end this chaos. That an unrestricted Trump administration is not good for any of us. I don't even recognize this country anymore, and as far as I'm concerned, I am never going to stop talking about what we can do to hold this government in check and build a power structure where we actually take our democracy back. And while the major problems we're dealing with right now might on the whole be stemming from the federal government, there is so much we can do to hold them in check with the state government. The Republicans understood this far sooner than the Democrats did, and long before they were overhauling government at the federal level, they were consolidating power to help them do that at the state level. So today I have invited the co-founder of the States Project, Daniel Squadron, to talk to us about the importance of state power. We have spoken to the States Project many times before because they are a tremendous organization who understood the power of state legislatures long before it was popular to do so. I am having Daniel, who is also a former state senator from New York, on to talk about the organization and his hopeful new book, The Fourth Branch, How State Government Can Save Our Union. Because Lord knows after watching that 4th of July performance, our union needs some saving. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, co-founder of the States Project, former New York State Senator, and author of the new book, The Fourth Branch, Daniel Squadron. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Thanks for joining me. I was saying we've had Melissa on the show a million times with the Giving Circles and the States Project, and we just love your organization. But I think it's really great to have you here because you've got this new book out. You're really leaning in on the importance of state leadership. And as you've said, coming out of 2024, a lot of voters, particularly Democratic voters, are feeling incredibly disillusioned with the federal government. We are clearly dealing with a broken political system where many of us feel like we have absolutely no control over the people who control our lives. And the Republican Congress has completely abdicated their responsibility to act as a check or balance on the executive branch of this government. And as you've said, the best place to fix some of these problems is actually in the states. It
really is. So, it's a little bit of a bad news, good news story. It's not news to anyone that at the federal level, things aren't going great right now. And I actually think it's okay to say to folks, if you feel powerless or unsure, that's real. That's because you're experiencing something right. Or if you even feel like whatever you do, you may not change the outcomes at the federal level, that's an okay thought to have. Truth is, at the federal level, campaigns at the presidential level cost billions of dollars. For Congress, cost tens or hundreds of millions. And to be the difference maker as an everyday person there is hard. But here's the really good news. Congress and the presidency and the courts are not the only three branches of our constitutional system. There is a fourth branch. In fact, it's really the first branch. It was the states that created the federal government, not the other way around. And states today still have enormous independent power relative to the federal government. We know that because we know Donald Trump is obsessed with trying to undermine it, but he is getting stuck because fundamentally it's the place that is hardest to control from the top down. But you know where it's the easiest to have an impact? For everyday people. Tiny numbers of people coming together can have an outsized impact. It is often cheaper to flip an entire legislative chamber than a single congressional district. We have said it a lot of times, but it is true because it costs so much money to flip a single congressional seat. You could actually flip an entire state house for less money just on 2 or 3 people that suddenly change the balance of power in that state house. And we can see the power of the states because the Republicans were far ahead of us on understanding the power of the states. They were not winning at the federal level. They were not winning the national zeitgeist. So they started to focus on the states. And you can see how much power the states have with what they've
they've been able to take away from people, from abortion rights to voting rights to getting rid of drop boxes to changing, the districts themselves to drawing the districts out. That's because an entire Republican state legislature said, yep, that we're going to redraw this district, and there was no one to stop them. And we have to see that we can use that power for good if we get the right people in charge of these state houses. As I was saying in the introduction, this really is something I think the Republicans got the memo on way earlier, that they're able to make so many changes because they understood the power of the states. And they understood that you could make so much of a difference, and you could even change the federal government from the state level. And this is you talking about fighting fire with fire.
Absolutely. And, there's really two reasons for that. There's no question that the conservative movement has been more focused on states and more effective in states. The two reasons are, one, the idea of state power became, through our country's history, and I talk about this a little bit, just connected with some conservative ideas. The idea that states should be allowed to pass racist laws, from the compromise that got the Constitution passed and ratified in the first place, all the way up through the Civil Rights Movement. Or since the New Deal, states have become the way where, if you want to do away with government programs, you claim you're not against popular government programs, you just claim states' rights. But there's nothing about our structure as a country that means states need to be the place where those conservative ideas win. And in fact, if you look at the New Deal, the programs of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 1930s and 40s, all of those ideas actually started in New York State. His labor secretary, Frances Perkins, the first woman ever to sit in the United States cabinet, had actually generated those ideas in New York. The second reason that I think the right has been so much more effective in states isn't actually because it was the Republican Party. And this is the thing that I think everyone can understand. There were folks who were trying to change the Republican Party and make it more conservative and make it more focused on a very narrow set of traditional values being taken up by the government, and corporations being allowed to pollute and profiteer without consequences. And those folks in the 1970s who were trying to change the Republican Party, they went to states by necessity because they were an easier place for them to have an impact. So Paul Weyrich, name most people don't know. If that's unfamiliar to you, you're like almost every American. But he founded the Heritage Foundation, which wrote Project 2025. And the same year he founded ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is the most important civic organization in American life most people have never, ever heard of. He did that because his ideas were not getting enough pickup for him in Washington. The Koch brothers, everyone's heard of them. They weren't even Republicans in the 1970s. They founded a think tank called the Cato Institute to take on the Republican idea factories. One of them even ran for vice president against Ronald Reagan's ticket in 1980. Imagine that, running against Ronald Reagan and then 20 years later being seen as a great Republican. The Kochs took up Paul Weyrich's call to arms and thought, boy, we want to become Republicans, but we want to change the party. And you know where they did it? In states. By the way, for them, you'll love this. There was one little benefit, which is most of their companies are regulated by states. So they also were able to, through their special interest control, make a buck.
No, I mean, listen, and they made a lot of bucks. Let's be honest. The Koch brothers did very well. But I think it's interesting you yeah, thanks to the states. And I think it's really important that we talk about organizations like the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society. I did an entire episode on ALEC because no one had a clue what we were talking about 2 years ago. If people want to go back and listen to that episode, it's ALEC, and it's a huge organization. Even things like the Powell memo, that was like, how do corporations take over and really have more power in American society? This all came out in the late 70s, early 80s, and Reagan allowed it all to happen. I mean, the Federalist Society got a ton done under Reagan. And that was also when we started having the pro-life movement and the evangelicals and the Christians sort of following the Republican Party because of the pro-life movement, which really, if you back it up to Paul Weyrich, is, it was about segregation. They didn't want these schools to have, integration. And so they were like, well, this isn't working. So we're just going to use this pro-life, save the babies thing. And so it's all part and parcel of the same thing. And it all started in many ways in the states, and then they built it out. And I've always said that the Republicans are far better at long-term thinking. They're far better at saying, we are very unhappy with, say, Roe v. Wade. And we're not just going to say, well, we throw up our hands and they won. They said, we are going to overturn this. And it's a 40-year plan come to fruition by the time we got to the Dobbs decision. It is a 40-year plan to stack the courts that Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society had to get the kind of court that would give them the decisions we're seeing today that are overturning, the Voting Rights Act and overturning personal civil liberties. Donald Trump, sadly, and I would say in combination with the Supreme Court, continues to be chipping away at America's electoral system at this point. He's trying to make sure that he cannot be held accountable by a Democratic Congress after the 2026 midterms because he knows that he's not popular. He knows that the things he's doing aren't popular. So he's doing everything he can to kind of weasel the system to make sure that his party takes incredibly aggressive actions in the states, including doing things like disregarding what we're talking about, this firewall between states' rights and federal rights, because the states have always had control over their own elections. And that's been a major focus of his second term. Where do you see us sitting now as far as election integrity?
Well, if there's one thing you can trust Donald Trump on, it's that he wants to gain power and serve his personal interests.
Yeah.
So don't take our word for it. Donald Trump is trying to weaken the independent power of states. He believes in Ronald Reagan's saying that the only reason we don't have an autocracy in this country is because of the independent power of states. I talk about that in the book as part of a scene in which a bunch of state lawmakers have been invited to the White House in Reagan's last term. They've gone every single year. And he says, our project is about giving you more power. It's pretty interesting, right? Reagan started his first campaign in Neshoba County, Mississippi, the area where 3 young civil rights workers had been killed only 16 years earlier, sending a very clear signal. And then this meeting of ALEC was at the end of his term. Today, Trump is so focused not on conservative principles, even of the type we were talking about before, but just on self-preservation and power, that he is obsessed, I believe, with the most independent source of power in the country's states. So in the spring, he tried to get Congress to pass something called the SAVE Act, which was all about preventing states from carrying out their constitutional right to run elections. At one point, he said, be like Jesus and pass it. That's a fairly heavy lobbying pitch, I think we could all agree. He meant
I think Jesus is making far too many appearances in Republican political statements recently. I remember listening to Spencer Pratt talk about, they were like, who is your political ideal? And he was like, Jesus. And I'm like, Jesus? Known for his politics. Like, what are you talking about? I feel like Jesus is being thrown around like a card they're playing to get power, which is what you're talking about, which is, of course, what Jesus was against.
Right. Now, there is something to remember in there, which is actually being willing to talk about your core principles in politics is a good thing. And I think actually Democrats don't do enough of. I think there is a set of core principles that are the foundational principles of our country. We should talk about more. But the other thing Trump has been doing, because it's really important to go all the way through this, is he's issued executive orders, which he doesn't need to pass through Congress, that have called on states to share all of this information with them that would make it much easier for his agencies to undermine elections. And of course, in states controlled by his allies, they're falling all over each other to comply with the illegal executive order. And in states where there's balanced power or where his allies are out of power, they're fighting. And they're actually having some success fighting it. This obsession isn't new, though. About a year ago, after July 4th, 2025, Donald Trump and Greg Abbott in Texas used the terrible tragedy on the Guadalupe River as an excuse to call the Texas legislature back into session so they could redraw the congressional map, which you'd already referenced. But here's what's important about that people don't realize. Donald Trump personally got on the phone to state lawmakers, personally. I talk to state lawmakers around the country all the time. And I've asked them, how many times the sitting president called you, to really push you on an issue? And, 100% of them just laugh. It's not a thing that has happened before, but Trump realizes the power and he's going directly at them. He personally called Indiana state senators and asked them to redraw maps. And when some of them refused, he took names and then had his allies fund a super PAC to take them out. In the late spring, he personally called South Carolina state lawmakers. But it doesn't even just go back a year. In 2020, we all remember January 6th. It was the most violent day to undermine the legitimate election result. But it actually, in my mind, wasn't the most dangerous day for our constitutional democracy. That was the day before Thanksgiving, when he invited the leaders of both chambers of the Michigan legislature, the Assembly and the Senate, to the Oval Office and urged them to use their vast power to prevent the certification of Michigan's elections. That night, they went and sipped champagne in the Trump Hotel. They went home and one of them agreed. So it all came down to a single vote. And the Senate president refused to undermine the election. But if he had agreed, that would have set off dominoes. Brad Raffensperger and everything leading up to January 6th wouldn't have been necessary because that election wouldn't have been concluded in its rightful way. Trump is obsessed with undermining the individual power of states. As Melissa likes to say, if states didn't control elections, we already wouldn't have competitive elections in this country.
I talk a lot about Quince for shopping because I feel guilty shopping in such a weird political and economic environment. It's really made me rethink what I buy. Quince is great because they focus on high-quality essentials like breathable, soft organic cotton, washable silk, but without the luxury markups. Quince has beautiful pieces, quality craftsmanship, with the price at 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work with ethical factories and cut out the middleman, so you pay for quality, not brand markup. And they don't just have clothes. It's really a destination for everything from kitchen to bedding to jewelry. I just ordered a new maxi silk skirt for the summer because I don't like to show my legs, but I do like things to be cool and flowy. And I like that effortless long skirt look with a t-shirt. Why not elevate your summer wardrobe but not break the bank while doing it? Go to quince.com/politicsgirl for free shipping on your order and 365 days of returns. And if you live in Canada, like my friends and family, it's available there now too. That's QUINCE.com/politicsgirl for free shipping and 365 days of returns. Quince.com/politicsgirl. I'm just going to keep saying this because it's such a testament to the product, but my son Lachlan, who will be going off to college in the fall, was recently doing his laundry and he asked if he could take our laundry sauce to school with him when he goes. So our teenage son asked if he could take our particular laundry detergent with him to college. Tell me another laundry detergent that a teenager would even notice, let alone want to include in the things he moves with. Here's the thing. I know I sound like an idiot talking about how great laundry sauce is, about how nice it smells or how well it cleans, the fact that they have partnered with top perfumers in the world to make their scents. But nothing tells you how great it actually is more than an 18-year-old asking if he can continue to use it across the country. Our family goes back and forth on scents. We are currently on a Siberian pine and Indonesian patchouli kick. But many of you might want something more bright and citrusy for the summer. Then I would look at their Italian bergamot. Or you could check out their brand new limited edition scent, Brazilian Vanilla, the perfect sunny fragrance with notes of whipped vanilla and caramel and coconut and white florals and grounding woods. Laundry Sauce recently came out with their first certified hypoallergenic fragrance, made for sensitive skin types called Himalayan Cashmere, with notes of light floral and pear. And Laundry Sauce isn't just about smelling incredible, it's engineered for performance. Their highly concentrated pods are packed with the cleaning power of bioenzymes that obliterate stains and keep everything fresh. For a limited time, our listeners will get 20% off their entire order when they use the code PoliticsGirl20 at laundrysauce.com. That's 20% off their order at laundrysauce.com with the promo code PoliticsGirl20. And after you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support the show and tell them we sent you. laundrysauce.com, code PoliticsGirl20. It's not just premium laundry pods. It's a full upgrade to your laundry routine. And it's teenager approved.
If states didn't control elections, we already wouldn't have competitive elections in this country.
No, I mean, look, this is why Trump is so busy, like you're saying, publicly calling out these state legislatures and state legislators personally for not redistricting the way he wants. Like we were talking about in Indiana, primarying these Republicans who won't go along with his plans, extorting state governments to hand over their voting rolls, signing these executive orders, which we have to remind people are not how laws are made in this country. He's signing them. They are legal, but theoretically another president can just come in and reverse them all, right? Like they're not, this is not how we make laws. We make laws through Congress, but he's signing these executive orders. He wants to create a national voting list that the federal government is in charge of. He's been trying to get rid of mail-in voting. Obviously, he's gerrymandering the states that Republicans control to the hilt, which is far easier now that the Supreme Court has decimated the protections of the Voting Rights Act. We are clearly living through this unprecedented, extremely questionable heavy-handed approach by the president to force state governments to bend to his will, to protect his power, to make sure that states are not independent, which they have always been, of his, and let's be honest, more specifically, the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society's agenda for America. And I feel like you mentioned your book a little earlier, and I feel like your book, which is The Fourth Branch, which came out June 9th, you talk about how these state legislators, the ones that Donald Trump is trying to manipulate, can take an increasingly large role on the national stage because they really do have far more power than we often think of. Can you tell me more about that?
There's really a lot of the good, the bad, and the bizarre in these legislatures. And I experienced some of that myself in New York State. In my first year in office, the entire New York State Senate shut down on a power struggle between breakaway Democrats and Republicans. Many of the most important players subsequently lived in federal prisons. But there's, other timelines as well here. Tony Vargas, a Democratic state senator from Omaha, Nebraska. He was in the superminority, which means, the overwhelmingly Republican chamber. Tony Vargas, elected as a Democrat, very few other Democrats, was then elected by all of his colleagues into one of the top 3 leadership positions in the chamber as recently as 2017 or 2018, because Nebraska still at that point had a bipartisan culture. Now that's collapsed in the last 8 or 10 years, but that's a pretty exciting timeline. Or Alaska, where the Speaker of the House is an independent, leading a group of other independents and almost all of the Democrats and Republicans in the majority. He's an interesting guy because he represents both the eastern and westernmost district in the country. It's all islands, as my old district in Manhattan and Brooklyn was, but otherwise very dissimilar islands. But his name is Bryce Edgman. In his first election, he was elected 725 to 725. It was actually a tie. It was a coin flip, which is just a reminder that unbelievably consequential people in states are elected by the barest of margins, which means for anyone who wants to make a difference, a few minutes or a few dollars, a few conversations could literally be the difference maker.
Yeah, if you ever want to think your vote doesn't count, look at states like that. I also think it's unfortunate because you're talking about, what happened in Nebraska, what was happening in Alaska. And I feel like in many ways, I think post Newt Gingrich, it became very hostile between the two parties. But there used to be a lot more working together for the good of the American people, a lot more working together for the good of the state. And now it's blind loyalty to Donald Trump. And if you're not, then he will take you out. And I think that really should upset people because if your representatives work for the president, they don't work for you. And so people shouldn't be like, well, my party keeps winning. You're like, no, you don't keep winning. The president keeps winning. But that means they can put a data center in your backyard and all of you can show up and no one cares. And that guy will keep his job, even though he didn't listen to you at all. I know a lot of people listening see these kind of things and they feel, as you were mentioning earlier, kind of helpless. And I feel like the point you're making in your book is, if you know where to focus your energy, if you know that you want to make a change, focus it on state governments, because if we can capture that power, it really gives us the ability to truly fight back. If we want to deal with the issues that matter most to ourselves, to our neighbors, it's the state level where we can most quickly and most effectively make a difference.
Absolutely. I sometimes say, and I know we can't get live call-ins, but what's the domestic policy? What's the issue within our country? Forget foreign policy. The issue within our country you most care about. And I've been doing this for years. And, some people say healthcare, and some people say climate, and some people say energy costs. Some people say, good jobs, a full-time job, being able to support a growing family. Some people say clean air and water. Some say criminal justice, fairness, or civil rights. But there are many others. I've gotten in Louisiana once, they really care about dams and dikes and levees for really important reasons. I've never once gotten a domestic policy issue where states haven't done more harm or good in the last 15 years than Congress has. Every single one. The two that surprise people the most are healthcare, because of course, 16 years ago, Obamacare was passed. But even if you include it, it was very important. But just about its most important provision was expanding Medicaid up into the middle class so that more people have access to it. Today, 17 years later, nearly 100 million Americans still live in states that don't have that expanded Medicaid, because it was actually states that had to act on it, even after the federal government made it possible.
I'm just going to say, Daniel, so people understand this. When Obamacare came around, when the Affordable Care Act came around, the federal government offered the states money to expand it so more people could be on affordable health care. And there was a bunch of Republican states that just refused the money. It was free money to help the people in their states, and they refused it because it was an Obama program. And to this day, there are so many people who are underinsured or not insured because they still refuse to take what was offered to them to make it better for the people of the state. And as you're saying, that's a state legislator problem because they're saying, we don't want it because it's yours, even though it makes the people of the state suffer. So why not change those representatives who would then look out for the people of the state first?
Right. In the first year of the States Project in 2017, we were able to help the Virginia Democrats come within just one seat of flipping the House. They didn't even flip the Virginia House, but it was so close that the Republicans allowed a vote on expanding Medicaid because they felt threatened by it. So that sort of grassroots campaign, a couple of districts here or there in Virginia, was able to materially impact tens of millions of lives. It actually happened in Virginia again recently. Right for the 2025 election, the Virginia legislature started a process to allow Virginians to vote on whether to change their congressional maps to offset the arms race of partisan map drawing that Donald Trump set off in Texas that we talked about before. And they set off that process. Virginians went and voted. 3.1 million Virginians turned out, and the new maps were passed. The Virginia Supreme Court then nullified that election, the votes of 3.1 million people, in a way that's essentially unprecedented, after an election saying that election never should have occurred.
Yeah, they could have mentioned it before.
It's really, when you talk about what's happening to our democracy, to me, one of the more, if not the most chilling thing that's actually occurred. What Trump is threatening is chilling, but in terms of what's occurred. Here's what's wild about that. In 2021, if one more seat had flipped in the Virginia House, the court would have had different members. The Virginia General Assembly, the House and the Senate, appoint the judges. And they had just enough votes after the 2021 election to appoint the judge that was the casting vote in that decision. Who would have ever thought that a single Virginia State House district in 2021 was going to impact 4 to 5 congressional seats in 2026? But that's the magic and the power of working on states. It's a very inspiring thing because instead of working on the federal government, the opposite happens. You think if you work and you're victorious or part of a coalition, suddenly things will happen, and too often they don't. The opposite happens to states. You don't even realize how big a ripple you've set off.
Yeah, no, it's truly amazing. Like, I mean, what you're saying, it's a domino effect. Like, this is why every election matters. Like, the election in 2021 affects the election here, that affects who that's on the Supreme Court. And you're going back to like this one person won by one vote, or they won because their name was pulled out of a hat. That's every vote counts in the state. Then every election matters in the state. And it only has a ripple effect down the line to what can actually happen. So really the focus being on the states is actually quite hopeful because, as you're saying, although you can change things desperately, like what's happening in Florida, and they say, we're not going to have any LGBTQ teaching anymore. We're going to take these books out of school and we're going to do this at the state level. Those terrible things that happen can also be good things that happen if you have a different group of people that are in charge. I feel like when you wrote your book, you were trying to give people hope, which people don't have a lot of right now, and get people to understand that Americans are not powerless to change politics and policies, but they need to start at a different place. We know the majority of us want a higher minimum wage, right? Federally, we don't get it. We know the majority of us want common sense gun legislation. We still don't have it. We know the majority of Americans were against this war that we're in Iran, but we're still spending $1 billion a day on it, right? And closer to home, we know that people don't want, as I was saying earlier, these data centers in their backyard, or their water to be polluted, or their air to be polluted, or their, land to be heated up. And yet they're still happening if you don't have representatives at the state level, even at the local level, that can fight back on your behalf. So we need champions. And I feel like the state leaders can be those champions if we focus on them and realize their importance. So my dad visited us for my son's graduation. And when he arrived, I took one look at his suitcase and I thought, no, we can do better than this. And my dad only travels with a carry-on, so Noble it is. Noble is rated #1 luggage on Trustpilot. While most luggage is simply a box on wheels, nothing about it actually makes travel easier, Noble has done it completely differently. First, their entire suitcase has no zipper at all. It locks shut with a latch system that can't be pried open. It has 360-degree wheels, which makes it effortless to pull so it glides along next to you instead of dragging, which, if you're someone like my 82-year-old father, is particularly helpful. There is a laptop pocket in the front that makes going through TSA easy. Now, my dad doesn't carry a laptop, but he has an iPad, so that fits well into the pocket as well. There's a built-in charging port to keep your phone alive so you're not crawling under a chair trying to plug in the phone at the gate. And finally, there's a cup holder. They built a flip-out cup holder right into the luggage. Total lifesaver in lines, at the gate, or just to make your travel day more convenient. Plus, the bag looks good. Its sleek, minimalist shape comes in different styles and colors so you can really personalize it to you. And like many of the things I talk about on this show, this is a company that puts its money where its mouth is. So each Noble suitcase comes with a 100-day money-back guarantee and lifetime warranty. This is a company that truly stands behind what they've made. So upgrade to luggage that looks better and lasts longer so you can travel smarter. Head to nobletravel.com for up to 46% off your entire order. That's NOBL travel.com for up to 46% off. And after you purchase, they're going to ask where you heard about them. Please support the show. Tell them we sent you. Men do not have a whole lot to worry about in the looks department. I mean, dad bods are considered hot, but their hair does cause them a lot of stress. So we want to make sure we help them feel their best, which is why I want to tell you about Eye Restore. Now, I have the Eye Restore Illumina face mask because I am concerned about my face. And my husband, Sean, has the Eye Restore Elite Laser Hair Growth System because his concern is his hairline and hair fullness. We do it together in bed at night like high-tech nerds, his Eye Restore on his head and mine on my face. Eye Restore has been leading the way in red light therapy for over 2 decades. They have helped shape the category with clinically backed devices trusted by over 500,000 customers worldwide. The Illumina face mask that I have is lightweight, cordless, packed with 2 times more LEDs than other top masks. It targets fine lines, breakouts, dullness with their triple wave therapy, and you just have to do it for 10 minutes a few times a week for brighter, smoother, healthier looking skin. The Eye Restore Elite uses 300 lasers and 200 LEDs to help regrow thicker, healthier hair in as little as 3 months. It's effortless. You literally just wear it while you're working or reading or watching TV at night. And the best part is you can bundle both products together to make the perfect upgrade to your routine. Eye Restore is so confident in their technology that they offer a 12-month money-back guarantee. If you don't see healthier looking skin or fuller looking hair, you're going to get a full refund, no question. Just results or your money back. Right now you can save on customer favorites like the Eye Restore Elite Helmet and the Illumina Face Mask by heading to iRestore.com and using the code PoliticsGirl. Unlock your best hair and skin with Eye Restore at iRestore.com/PoliticsGirl. That's PoliticsGirl at iRestore.com. And if they ask, support the show. Tell them we sent you. Give your hair and skin the upgrade they deserve so you can feel confident and refreshed this summer. The state leaders can be those champions if we focus on them and realize their importance.
They really can. And, I do really try to give people hope in this book because, no little boy or girl political operative wants to grow up and spend their life working in states. But the reason it's so inspiring is because we're not asking people to do a thing that they get asked to do too often in politics. I think too often in politics, people are asked not to believe their lying eyes. People feel hopeless or helpless. People doom scroll and click on whatever, makes them feel a little better because they're not allowed to admit that their action on those big races is unlikely to be the deciding action. And so I think it's actually not giving up to say, okay, that's an okay feeling to have, but it doesn't mean you can give up. In fact, if we really believe in democracy, like really believe in it, then it is each of our responsibility to be rigorous with ourselves as to how we can have the biggest impact for our vision to win in that democracy.
Right.
It's not just about how we feel. It's not just about the experiences we have. It's about the fact that we're participants in our own government. We are the ones giving the consent. And if you think rigorously like that, you actually find yourself in a much more hopeful place.
I love what you do at the Staged Project because I think you've always, first of all, you do that thing where you say, it's less expensive to flip this whole state legislature than it is to, win a Senate seat or a congressional House seat. But if you're properly organized the way the States Project is, because you've always made very strategic plans. And I think what you're talking about in what you were just saying is like, it's strategy over feelings. You can say like, okay, this is where I want to make change. And I feel really upset about this, but I'm not going to give all my money to this one candidate that's running against this senator I hate. I'm going to put my money into this state legislator race because I can actually flip the entire state race, who will then decide who the Supreme Court justices are in the state, who will decide on what we do from gerrymandering to not gerrymandering, this kind of thing. And I think it's really strategic to put it out there and say, we're going to win majorities in these states that will protect not only our rights, but our democracy on the whole, because at the state level, they're the ones deciding the state lines. They're the ones deciding who's going to draw the state lines. They're the ones deciding how it's all going to be broken up. So making those decisions feels very strategic. It also feels like you're actually making a difference. And as you're saying, it doesn't mean we have to ignore these national races. We have to flip the House. I hope we can flip the Senate because we have to hold this administration accountable, but we just have to be really strategic about where we put our energy. And I know you're still working at the States Project really seriously with the giving circles. Could you tell people, in case they haven't heard my episodes with Melissa many times, why giving circles are so useful and why they really help when you're trying to flip state legislative races?
Absolutely. And, the giving circles really are the connection between those emotions that are important. We all feel them. It's a scary time. And turning those emotions into motivation that takes seriously the fact that you're a participant in our democracy, not a spectator to its destruction. Right. And so the giving circles let folks come together and create their own giving group. They get a web page and they can name themselves. They get to choose which state they want to have an impact in based on the information that the States Project shares with them that makes it really easy to understand the stakes in different places. The biggest problem we have actually isn't that folks don't understand the different states they can choose. It's that they go and become deeper experts on them sometimes, even than we've been, and we end up learning from them because it's so engaging. And then with all that information, they can choose their state. 100% of the dollars they raise end up contributed into that state that they've chosen for the candidates and campaigns to actually have a chance to have the funding to communicate with voters. And what that means is those giving circles are freeing up a candidate, and believe me, I've been there, who's in a basement room calling special interest after national donor to get off the phones and get out on the doors. So what the States Project says the campaign is the only one thing we want you to do, which is run an effective campaign in your own district.
You get you and your friends together. You're like, look, we hate this. Let's do a States Project giving circle. Let's all get together. We'll do it like once a week. We'll raise money from the people that we know. We'll use the States Project, what you guys are doing at the national level. And you'll say, these are the 3 seats that we could easily flip. These people are very unpopular. If we flip these 3 seats, the entire state legislature moves from Republican majority to Democratic majority. We only have to flip these 3 seats, and you get your giving circles within that state to work on those 3 seats strategically, to flip that over, to talk to their friends, to say, this is the most important race you have to do. But you are working with your people, you're working with your friends, you're doing something really effective. And then when you see your state legislator change, you go, dude, I did that. Like we did that. We did that with our friends. And it's a very productive, very open and hopeful way to kind of work into politics and make you feel like you actually have power again, to get people out there making these big changes. Because sometimes it's just 1 seat. Sometimes you're like, the supermajority is gone away with this 1 seat. Like, let's flip that 1 seat. And you put all your attention towards that at the state level. And then you can really see the fruits of your labor. And I think that's actually very hopeful for people, which goes back to your book. It's about saying like, look what we did, and we can effectively do this, which you often don't feel at the federal level. You feel like, oh my God, like it's so out of my control. But at the state level, no, it's very much in your control.
And think about this. The giving circles were an unbelievably meaningful donor in 2022 in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania House ended up flipping by 1 district that was decided by 63 votes. 63 votes. The giving circles collectively, but also each giving circle was able to fund enough campaign contact and also just release folks off their fundraising to the doors that they literally were each the decision maker. 1 less, and we probably would have come up short. Now, that's not a unique case. 63 votes for an entire chamber is dramatic, but the number of chambers that have flipped by between 200 or 150 and 700 votes is enormous. That's happened over the last 8 years in Arizona, in Michigan, in Minnesota, in New Hampshire, I believe in North Carolina. So you're going to be right in the mix. But there's another thing that's going to be happening, and this is the inspiration. This is where the emotions come back in. You start with these emotions that are kind of helpless and hopeless, and we say, you have to be rigorous. You're a member of the democracy, and that's hard. But then on the back end, you have this feeling of walking through the world with more power than you had because you understand how power is working and your role in it. And that's what the States Project tries to do. And Giving Circle leaders, and I start the book with Melissa and another young adult author, Gail Foreman, sort of taking up this challenge, forming the first Giving Circle and convincing me, along with my co-founder, Adam Pritzker, to leave my political career to see if we can build this. I end with all of the Giving Circles that have taken up the call, and there's more than 200 now. And I say, because it's true, for me, the emotional sustenance of this is that they know more about the state they've chosen at this point than I do. They have actually become confident. And, I don't love talking about politics casually sometimes because just the doom scrolling, the same story, it's not. When I talk about politics with the Giving Circles, it's the most fascinating thing because they believe in it.
Yeah. No, I mean, here's the thing. Like, we're sitting here in the middle of the summer, and if you're like, God, I don't know what to do except doom scroll. Like, here's the thing. Get together with your friends once a week, have a lemonade, a glass of wine, and be like, all right, which one of these races are we going to completely flip and like take everyone by storm? Make a plan that you're actually doing something useful, but you're hanging out with your friends in the summer doing it, right? Like there's no reason that this can't be a joyful experience. We have forgotten that politics and being part of our democracy can be something helpful and hopeful, and we can actually do good things. And we can hold off the worst instincts of the federal government by the state government. And we have to remember, this is a federalist society. We are supposed to have state governments and federal government. And the thing is that it's the Republicans for years that talked about states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. And now that the federal government has flipped and the Supreme Court seems to be in the bag, we have to just embrace states' rights so deeply that we really care about these races that for a long time we ignored. And we can do it in a way that is with our friends, with our people, and makes real change. Come November, we could flip so many state houses that like good luck redrawing all the maps if you don't have the power in the states, right? Like there is a way to fight back that is actually coming from, I think about it like a battle, it's like instead of having the two armies meet head on, you are the group that went around behind the trees and met them at the back, right? And like, that's how you have to look at it. You're like, oh man, we're doing this, we're flipping this seat, we're doing this seat. And you guys will help them at the States Project. That's what I think is so cool. You are going to help them organize. They don't need to think about it all themselves. They don't need to know which candidate necessarily. Over time, they probably do learn more than you guys do because that's their district, that's their state. But you start by saying, this is flippable, you guys can change this one. We only need this one seat. And they're like, let's do it. It's actually very exciting to know that you can be victorious here because I think we often feel like we just keep losing. And this is super exciting. So tell people how they can help your mission, where they go, what they do, how they start a Giving Circle. And then I want you to tell us how we can buy your book because I find your book so hopeful and I want people to be buying it and embracing your ideas.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So statesproject.org will tell you everything you need to know about a Giving Circle. Also, everything you need to know about a Giving Circle, you can get to from fourthbranchbook.com because it's the project is make this make sense to people. We need more people to think about power the way Paul Weyrich and the Koch brothers and Donald Trump thought about power. And you can do it. And we want it to be fun. That's the mission of the States Project, and it's a way to get you directly involved in the politics. It's the mission of the Fourth Branch book so that you can unpack power and then position yourself within it. So statesproject.org, start a Giving Circle. It's clock is ticking here, middle of the summer. By Labor Day, a lot of these campaigns need to be fully funded. And fourthbranchbook.com, you can take it on and make it your own.
I think there's people out here feeling terrified and immobilized and in many ways probably apathetic. And I think what you've written in the Fourth Branch and also what you're doing at the States Project is the opposite to those things. It is the opposite to immobilization, the opposite to apathy, and honestly, the opposite to being afraid, because it's action-based and action is the antithesis to fear. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so grateful that you started the States Project. I'm so grateful you took your own personal career and moved it to a career that could help so many more people in the country and honestly be a better steward of democracy yourself. So thank you. I hope everyone will buy your book, but you'll have to come back on and talk to us, in September about where we're at.
Thank you. And thank Melissa, Gail, and Adam for inspiring me to do that.
Yeah. Fantastic people. States Project, you guys, this is the organization. We're going to flip all these state houses. Thank you so much for coming today. So that was Daniel Squadron, the co-founder of the amazing States Project, reminding us that the power to really take back our country is the most efficient and least expensive through the states, that we can work together with our people to flip state houses across the country. So when the federal government tries to strip us of our rights, we have an entire line of defense at the state level to protect our liberties, shore up our civil rights, and make sure the seats for the federal government are drawn fairly. So many federal rights start at the state level or live and die at the state level. So let's be strategic about who is in charge at the state level. Enough is enough with this government. Let's use every tool in our arsenal to fight back and win. I want to thank Daniel for joining us today and you for caring enough about democracy to be here. Now go check out Daniel's amazing book, The Fourth Branch, and find some friends to flip a state house. Enough with this doom and gloom. We are winning from here on. Until next week. PG out. Before you go, I want to remind you that the American government is trying to silence any voices that don't toe the party line. They don't want people to know what they're doing or how we can fight back, which is why they've had their billionaire friends buy up all the media and destroy our relationship to the truth. So if you respect what I'm trying to do here, if you would like to get this podcast ad-free, delivered directly to your inbox along with my kitchen rants and TV appearances, please consider becoming a member of PoliticsGirl Premium by going to politicsgirl.com and signing up. If you are already a premium member of this podcast, thank you for your support. And if you're not a member, please consider becoming a patron of my work. If you want real knowledge in a world of lies, it is essential to support those of us out here still trying to bring them to you. There is a link to sign up in the bio of this episode, but also at politicsgirl.com. And as always, please like and share these podcasts so we can grow our audience, because the more people who have access to this kind of information, the better. As always, thank you for your time and support. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.